Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us today. I'm very pleased to be joined by a high profile and my esteemed panelist. And actually, this panel is pretty interesting because we have multiple backgrounds here, and I hope that we can address the topic of the panel, which is challenges and opportunities. So I'm joined by Mr. Faisal bin Faqeeh, the chairman of bin Faqeeh, and I'm joined by Bassam Noor, who is the chief investment officer, alternative investments in Derayah Financials. I'm joined by Chris Gibson, associate director at Savills, and Stefan Burch, partner at Deloitte Middle East. So I would like to continue from where we left from the first panel, which was talking really about the outlook in the real estate. And there were a couple of very relevant points that were mentioned, and particularly when it came to digitalization, to the impact of sustainability. And I will start with Mr. Faisal first. So from your perspective, and as one of the major developers in the Kingdom of Bahrain, what do you see are the areas of that I would say maybe some challenges they are facing at the current moment, and any challenges that you foresee coming as well?
Yes, good morning, everybody. Thank you for giving me this great opportunity. And it's a good question, actually. We can understand what is coming to us on 2030s and the years coming. I think the challenges is we have to adopt the technology which is coming, such as the solar, others technology which will be adopted in our buildings as smart system. It won't be the smart system, the one we are talking about. I would like to put in an example which it can be really for us to understand where we are going. I think the technology, it will be in everything, the deliveries on the buildings, it's gonna change. And we have to be preparing the platform for all the buildings to be ready for the new technology which is going to come. An example, we know that in the future coming, the drone will be the first thing. It will be used in the deliveries, in the taxis, and whatsoever. So thinking of that, I think we should know that the drone, where it's going to be landed in this particular building. I mean, we have to be prepared for this. I'm sorry, I'm giving you just an example of studying what we need to understand about that. Other things, I think for the solar, it's a really challenging business for the developer because actually not every building can have the solar because it depends on the location and the energy that is going to be directly coming to the building to absorb the energy. So I think by developing this technology, it might be useful for majority of the real estate sector, and it won't work. So this is basically what I feel about it.
Thank you very much. And I mean, raising this point is very timely at the moment. So I think I will go to Chris, and continuing on what Mr. Faisal have mentioned just now. So of course, renewable energy efficiency when it comes to buildings is extremely important, and especially with the recent commitments towards net zero as well as the green initiatives. Construction and building, real estate sector is one of the major contributors in that field. So from your perspective, and how do you see this affecting real estate developers, real estate market?
Certainly, first of all, thank you for inviting me here today. What a fantastic venue, superb venue, and congratulations to everybody for setting this up at the BIBF. To answer your question, there are many different contributing factors. We have new build, we have existing properties that are in play. Some of those people that own their own small buildings at the moment are just as important as the big developers in Bahrain to have that overall commitment to sustainability and getting to that green level going forward. So the build and the opportunity then needs to be considered with perhaps some of the renewable companies. Many of those new companies, consultants coming in here, to assist small portfolio and large portfolio clients and owners that are out there. There's an opportunity to redevelop and capitalize on the region's wind and solar energy, just as a very small part of it. The new builds with the different type of manufacturing components that can be put in will have a slightly higher value. Therefore, it will extend the cost for certain projects as well. However, the return should come back later. So it's a long game, which indeed the real estate industry is. It goes over a period of time. It's not a quick win scenario that people get by investing in a property. It's over a longer period of time.
Thank you, Chris. You touched upon an important aspect of real estate, which is the long-term kind of investment, and it is a cycle until you kind of actually realize the financial rewards from it. So this will take me to Stefan. Regarding about your role, so basically you are a partner in Deloitte and you are looking at it more from a strategic advisory perspective. So what can you tell us when it comes to, for example, sustainable related issues that are being undertaken into real estate, probably mostly on the future outlook of it and what are companies doing with it now?
Yeah, thank you very much, and thank you for having me here today. I think the last time I was at a real physical conference was in 2019 in Riyadh, so it's wonderful to be back here with people. Look, really great question. I mean, I suppose what I'd like to do is sort of reframe it slightly and touch on something we spoke about in the earlier panel, and that was about disruption. You know, if you talk to me about the future of real estate as an industry at a kind of macro level, I would say digitalization and the manner in which we use data is going to be the singular biggest driver going forward. And by which I mean the way that we as consultants have been interacting with the built environment, advising on it, understanding it, for the past 10 years is not going to be the way we interact with it going forward. And what I mean by this is it's going to all be about how we understand data and how we utilize and harness that data to make more informed decisions about the real estate universe going forward. So the digital twin is going to be important, so people can understand and model large-scale developments before they have to actually invest an awful lot of money in infrastructure. This is going to be important. GIS is going to be important. We're working on a number of platforms at the moment which will enable developers of master plans to effectively map the area and overlay available data. Now, whether that's GDP data, whether that's population data, or whether that's social infrastructure data, such as locations of hospitals, locations of schools, in order to drive better and more informed conclusions as to the performance of real estate markets. Because I think one thing that I would say from an advisory point of view, rather than maybe Chris's point of view as an agent, is I think agents are incredibly intuitive about markets. Going forward, though, it's going to be interesting and important to understand why markets are moving in certain ways, rather than understanding that they are moving, so to speak. So effectively codifying market movements and being able to draw better conclusions about that market. And this is important because, and just bringing this back to sustainability, it's going to be incredibly important to provide market-facing developments because, you know, we're dealing with finite resources. So what you don't want to do is build a non-market-facing product, but do so in a green environment. I mean, this doesn't make any sense. Not only does the building have to be built with good quality, sustainable materials and be LEED certified or BREEAM certified, that's all fine. But if it's unsustainable from a market perspective, it's effectively 100% unsustainable. So I think that's pretty important.
Yeah, exactly. And this take me, I think, nicely to Bassam, if he's online. I don't see him. Bassam, are you with us?
Hi, Zeeba. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. So, Bassam, I mean, from your role as Chief Investment Officer and specializing in alternative investment, and from your previous experience also in the real estate investment. Now, real estate can be either a direct investment through directly acquiring land, buildings, or it can be indirect through investing in equities or debt. So how do you see the market moving there, and what are the challenges that you are envisaging or you can share with us now?
Sure. So what's happening in the real estate market? We've seen two different trends. One is the market trend, which has been highlighted by my colleagues and by their discussions about what's happening in the market from moving to online and working from home as well. So these trends, we all know, has been very slow, despite it's been highlighted recently by COVID, but we've been hearing about the death of retail for 20 years and working from home for the last maybe 40 to 50 years. I'm not saying that they are not happening, they are happening, but the pace of change in that is extremely slow. So if people, investors, they suddenly make changes based on these two factors, they might not recoup all the full benefits of that. On the other hand, we have the greatest disruptor of real estate since antiquity, which is the government, whether it's directly or indirectly, and the changes that it can impact the real estate industry in general. So directly what they can do is either increase the supply of space, whether office, resi, or any kind of thing, and at the same time they can reduce the supply, or they can increase the demand by offering subsidized loans, for example, to residential, so they can buy property just like we've seen in the US with the Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, and in Saudi through the Ministry of Housing, as well as in Bahrain. So that's created additional demand. And of course, indirectly through making sure the infrastructure, whether from roads or electricity, is available and is up to standards and getting improved. Because once you have more easier transportation modes, then people could easier work remotely, for example, or they could be more happy to live in the suburbs versus living in downtown. So the long-term impact is there, but it's moving very slowly, and we need to be aware of the challenges in that and how you shift your portfolio for long-term investment. And at the same time, we need to keep an eye on the government and the initiative that they are taking, how the impact could have on real estate in general, especially in this era of big government around the world.
Exactly. Thank you for sharing these points. And I mean, the role of the government initiatives, of course, is very important. And since we had in the previous panel the chief executive of RERA, he addressed about the role of RERA in identifying gaps and actually filling them, which also one of the panelists mentioned how this has changed the way developers are operating, and it has enhanced the corporate governance in the sector. So one of the points that was also mentioned in the previous panel was the role of the digitalization as both a disruptor and an enabler. And we've spoken about the challenges, but now I would like to think about how can we have more enablers and what kind of opportunities are there, what kind of new things we can look at. So one of the points that was mentioned is looking at the new investments and developments more from an experiential view rather than just a property that is built there. So this will take me to Mr. Faisal, and of course, again, as one of the major real estate developers in Bahrain, you've done a lot of projects, and I wanted to know your views as how do you see the future, like in terms of the opportunities that are there, and how are you seizing them?
Yes, thank you for the question. I think what we're looking at is from the government announcement that it just came recently. I think we have a lot to do, and with all this island that is coming around Bahrain, and I think there is more to give, and it's still, I think it's too early to judge where we need to draw our plans. But I think we could do a lot, and we should target ourselves as well in increasing the population of the country so everything can work together. And we are really very optimistic into going into this new projects that have been announced from the government, and I would like to thank them very much. And that it will make Bahrain, inshallah, hopefully in the future coming very attractive for the world as well. That's it.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you for bringing up the new projects that are coming on board, which takes me to the next discussion point. And I think I will be addressing this both to Chris and Stefan because it is very much relevant to your areas, which is how do you see the demand and supply in terms of real estate properties, and perhaps maybe on the retail perspective, on the commercial perspective? What are your views on this?
Who do you want to ask, myself or Stefan?
You can start.
Okay, no problem at all. First of all, I would like to say that everything that has been said today already, the strategic planning, the 10-year programs, Savills and all of us agree with all of those. What I'm trying to give to this particular panel is a slightly different dimension instead of the repetitive ideas that we are all aware of. So we know of that as Savills. We look at the 10-year plans. We look at the strategies, the sustainability, everything that's in there, much like all of the strategic advisors that have got an incredible amount of knowledge here today. We also all have to think that way. And that's the good thing about RERA. It's going to bring people up to a certain level. And understanding then into your question, supply and demand, then has a whole number of different constraints and different questions that we have to address going over time. As we stand at the moment, your question about supply and demand, yes, it was mentioned in the CBRE presentation as well. The shift into some communal offices as opposed to the traditional offices is going to happen for many businesses, but maybe not all. So we need to strike the balance on the way through. By 2030, perhaps it will be more common. It started in New York, it started in London with more communal offices. It's now going to different places. However, encouraging businesses and new businesses will then help create the supply into that market by having more demand. Within retail, yes, the change to buying online, 20-30% up compared to what it was before COVID started. The still touch and feel for certain products is going to be there. Luxury brands, mid-range brands will all have their own strategic plans going towards the future, but the reality is that there is an oversupply to the current demand, and this is where the strategies of filling that demand are critical at all levels, all demographics, to bring in the real estate sector being able to furnish the need for those people coming in. So it's a group view, it's a move towards it, and it's at this level, and that level. Everyone needs to work together. That's the good thing about these type of forums. It starts talking about strategies and then moves on to, well, how are we going to do it? How are we actually going to achieve these goals? In any good strat plan, you've got your objectives, you've got your strategies, you've got your goals, and in between, that one big thing, how are we going to do it? And that's where everyone needs to work together as RERA, RICS, property professionals, everyone working together will start moving in that same direction, a common goal to what the first panel talked about as well.
Yeah.
That's a basic overview, but non-specific, because we don't know all of the answers just yet.
Exactly. I mean, there's a lot of unknown and things keep on changing at a very fast pace. So, Stefan, I would like to hear your views on the same topic.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think, the first thing to say is that there's been an awfully big shift in the regulatory environment in Bahrain, and that's good, and that's a massive step forward, and it's sort of laying a foundation or a fabric to build on. I mean, what I would say from a kind of advisor's point of view is to stress the importance of feasibility studies and understanding as best you can current market demand in order to provide stock to the market that is fit for purpose, that is defendable. When you talk about sustainability, when you talk about ESG, we've got to put things into the market that are fit for purpose for the next 100, 150 years, rather than the short term. The challenge, obviously, is that, and this isn't just a challenge facing the Bahraini market, not only the regional market, but markets, across the globe, is, how do we deal with the future? And I think COVID hasn't necessarily changed the way we were going. It's just primed everything and brought everything that much, so it's brought things to the fore that much quicker. And so we've spoken about retail already, and I think that's one of the most obvious sectors where we'll see a real shift. And I think this going down the road of experiential real estate, trying to boost dwell time, is going to be really important. There won't be a non-need for bricks and mortar real estate. It's just the real estate will start doing something very different. Okay. Logistics, last mile delivery, this is going to be important, and we're seeing globally investment levels going into industrial at all-time highs, driving yields down to places where we typically think of office yields being, so that's important, and it's all about trying to understand the constant sort of shift in dynamic and being able to position your product for that future. And I think we've spoken about it before, it's going to be about flexibility. And so, and just touching on the point I made earlier about, data analytics, that gives you a tool to better make decisions about the future in a world that's incredibly, hard to navigate. So there are tools out there, but I think it's very, very important to underpin everything by rigorous and robust study in order to put correct stock into the market in order to be market facing.
Exactly. I mean, you shed light, both you and Chris, important points, because the way businesses and investment valuations are done, they start with the historical and then they look at the trends and the projections of what's going on. But in the face of a lot of unknowns, it could be pretty challenging. So this will take me to Bassam, and my question would be, from an investment perspective, from a financial perspective, what are your views in terms of the opportunities in the sector, and what are investors looking at?
All right, so there are a lot of opportunities available at the moment. There has to do with repositioning and renovating the existing stocks at different sectors. For example, retail and shopping malls, they have to be repositioned as an entertainment district. So that's an opportunity there. The existing stock of warehouses, for example, no longer they need the tenants, they need the shady type of warehouses, very low ceiling heights. They need the more modern ones. So that's another opportunity. And the office sector as well, people, they need the parking, they need more amenities, more natural light. So a lot of, we need to bring, especially in the Middle East or in GCC, our portfolio of assets into the modern age. There's a lot of opportunity in the existing stock. And in the new opportunities in the new sectors, I won't go far away and say we've seen a lot of, and what investors they're looking for, cell towers, logistics, warehouses, there have been data centers. The problem with these three different sectors that depending a lot on the long-term trend of people moving online and the requirement for data and requirement for storage spaces, that we've seen the yield, not in this part of the world, but mainly in the Western world and Eastern and in Asia. The yield for such a thing has been dropped significantly over the last 10 years. So we're talking about, for example, for logistics, 3 to 4% on a dollar base, cell towers, close to 0%. A lot of it is betting on a substantial increase in rent over the many years. So if the investor is looking for a long-term capital appreciation, then he should be looking into look into these sectors. If investors are looking for slightly higher cash investment, they're looking into traditional office, residential, and shopping malls, as long as there is a component to it for some kind of renovation to have the extra bump and income in the long run.
Thank you, Bassam. So this is just the final round of question from my side, and it will be just your final thoughts on the challenges and opportunities, and perhaps, if relevant, any lessons that you can share with us from your experience. So I will start with Mr. Faisal.
Yeah, thank you. First of all, I would like to thank you, Zeeba, and I would like to thank as well BIBF for having me today. And I would like to thank the government for all the supports that is providing to the sector as well. And I hope for the coming years we can see more coordination between the private sector and the government to share whatever information or thoughts that we have that is going to help the sector to move forward in a better way. Thank you very much all. I wish you a good day.
Thank you. And Stephen?
Yep, thank you very much for hosting as well. In terms of the future, I think it's about, as I say, it's about trying to leverage data in order to draw conclusions about how people want to live, work, and play going forward. I mean, one thing we haven't touched on today is mobility, and that's a whole nother driving factor in real estate markets in terms of being able to open up non-core areas for cities, slightly lower land values, giving opportunities for developers, etc. So I think flexibility is the key going forward. And I think, yes, digitalization, but real estate bricks and mortar are here to stay. It's just going to be an interesting change as to how we utilize those bricks and mortar going forward.
Thank you. Chris?
Thank you again, Zeeba. Very, very good little session. I hope everyone's enjoyed it. Just to sum it up, I think here's the thing. We're at a time of change. We are having to use that data, that information that Stefan mentioned and other people have mentioned today. The one word that came out from the first panel was integration. And then the transparency that we've got talking to each other, working together to try and get the future where we think it's going to be in 2030. I welcome competition with different malls coming through, with different office blocks. Now the challenge is going to be getting people to come to this wonderful island and set up shop, whether it's an international company, a local company that it's encouraged to develop, retail, residential, huge part of it. There are so many different factors, but the opportunity is there, the foundations are in place. And the good thing is that we're following a set of standards. So for that, we should all be grateful and welcome change. As somebody said in another company, change happens. Well, it kind of does. So that's how I'd sum it up. The future's there for everybody, and it is a potentially exceptional future for Bahrain.
Thank you. Bassam, your final thoughts?
Again, the same thing. There's a lot of data that is coming in, especially in this time of our life. Real estate investor should look into this data, make decisions based on that, and be careful not to read too much in the long-term trends in the market, as well as just keep an eye on the government initiative. Work closely with the government, encourage the type of cooperation that would benefit the developer, benefit the asset owner, benefit the ordinary person, as well as the government.
Thank you, and thank you all for your participation. I think we have maybe 5 minutes to take up some questions.
Thank you all for this informative panel. My question is, if you allow me, for Bassam. He mentioned that the new opportunities might include the office spaces. I want to know from his opinion after the pandemic that there are many talks that the office space might be less, the demand might be less. What is his opinion? And maybe Chris can add to this as well. Thank you.
See, in terms of office space, we have, if you guys remember, in March 2020, where everyone thinking it's the death of office. No one is going back to the office, and the pandemic would result in that. I think a year later after that, nobody actually is talking about the death of the office. All the major corporations and the companies, they learned the hard lesson that they need the people in the office. And even Google, even though that they have postponed the return to the office, they say they would ask all their employees to come in to the office. They're a bit more flexible at the moment because there is a big shortage of labor in the market in the US. But the long term, I think office, for many psychological fundamental reasons, is an extremely important part of human life. There are some certain very minimal profession of people that they're okay to work offline, but the majority of them, either because of the work requirement or it's because their own self-interest, they would like to be in the office. But what has been changing in the office is that we no longer can live or work all the time or be in a place where surrounded by blocks without natural light, without any entertainment or any kind of amenities next to it, and having difficulty in just finding a car park if the infrastructure is not that great. So these things have to change, and the office building that has natural light, has the office nice park space ratios and good amenities and good location would be an extremely hard demand in the future.
Yeah, and can I just add to that? I completely agree with everything that Bassam says. I think there's going to be an evolution of the office. You know, it's not going to go. Interestingly enough, a year ago, Deloitte did a survey, an office market sentiment survey. 70-odd% of respondents said they were not planning on changing their office footprint. We've just redone the survey, and it's going to be launched in a couple of weeks' time. 78% of respondents are, again, not going to change their footprint. So it's really interesting. You know, this really sort of brings out how the office is not dead at all. It's going to go through an evolution. I think people will use it differently. You know, they possibly might not be in 5 days a week, but again, they won't be in 1 day a week. There'll be a flex model. I mean, we at Deloitte have just rolled out a hybrid works concept, and it's all about, you know, using the office in the way that you need to use it. So that's going to vary across industry. You know, whether you are banking or whether you are, you know, sort of consumer, but it's definitely here to stay. And I think just going back to what Taimur said earlier, I think the adaptation and the sort of redevelopment of older stock is going to be really important as well. And Bassam mentioned it as well, vis-a-vis retail, you know, large out-of-town retail space. That again is going to go through this kind of evolution. So I think redevelopment and repositioning is key.
Very quickly, I think everything's been said. It probably answered your question, but you did actually direct it. When it comes to where the future lies, that is going to be in the hands of the individual businesses and their particular requirements for their staff, and the human capital was mentioned earlier on. Still going to be a huge part of it. The camaraderie, the motivation of working with people is not going to go away, and there will be an adapting of certain ways that certain businesses work, and probably be driven from overseas, but the cultural requirements for different regions are going to be hugely important to that. You don't have to follow the process for Europe if in the Middle East you like it a certain way, or Africa a different way as well. You know, just different areas have different cultural demands and expectations, and we have to respect that. And that is very much part of the future for Bahrain.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We have so many questions. I think, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Hi, my question is to Stephen. You have mentioned a lot about experiential, creating different experiences in real estate that will make the difference. And probably we have seen it a lot in the retail, where they have created a lot of unique experiences when it comes to plugging FEC, for example, into malls, and different small experiences that makes the differentiation and created them as a destination. How do you think that in residential development and real estate, that they can achieve such an experiences while maintaining the affordability? As Taimur mentioned, that will be the key, that they create affordability at the same time creating a unique experiences.
That's a really good question, actually. What's quite interesting, actually, is if you think back to Timur's slide, he mentions the PRS, the private rented sector, and I think that's going to be key. And so to answer your question, I think, well, to answer your question very quickly, because we could do this for a long time, I think what we're going to see in residential is a lot more developments that have amenities built in. So what you can do is not only raise quality, units can get smaller, and thus coming into your point about affordability, but then people can take advantage of the sort of mixed use quality of the product. And I think building into that as well, transit-orientated developments. So, public transport. So people might not need garages for their cars. So I think it's all about mixed use. And we spoke earlier about integration, and I think that's key as well. So I think we'll see much more integrated development, whether that be with retail, entertainment, service and ancillary retail, as well as transit and mobility solutions. I think that's what we'll see. So if you look at places like the UK, PRS is huge, and I think that will be a model going forward, in order to not only rise quality but also deal with affordability.
Thank you very much. I think for the sake of time, we'll just take one final question.
Thank you very much. Well, it's about seizing the opportunities and the announcement of government of Bahrain for the 5 islands. Here we should touch on the missing opportunities with the cross-border investors. And we haven't such a big cross-border investors in Bahrain. And those investors, who have the power for a larger scale development, and again, they have a larger scale as well of empowering Bahraini people for better jobs as well. So those cross-border investors with big scale of investment can really create a better or additional destination, and they can also bring another innovations into the market. Another point is about the alternative investment in Bahrain, where we can see is lots of similar properties in Bahrain, and I think it is the time to have an alternative real estate investment, and we can touch on a point of the PropTech. We can see in Europe and lots of places around the world, the data centers, for example, Amazons and other than Amazons. And as well, as far as we talk about that Bahrain is advanced in fintech, and we want it to be advanced in PropTech, then the data centers might be a great opportunity for alternative investments, along with conceptual innovation in the existing properties like the residential and retail. Thank you.
Thank you. I think, Mr. Faisal, if you can take this question.
Yes, I think he have mentioned a lot of things, so I just have to break it down. I think the opportunity which is going to be for the government announcement, actually what we have to do is we have to wait to see the information deeply, what it's all about. And then I think what we need to do is we need to concentrate around, not in specific on the GCC, because the scale of the business is really huge. And I don't think it's enough investors can cover this sector and this big development which is going to happen. So I think Bahrain should target international market, and such as an Asian market, American markets, Europe markets, and all of that. And I don't think this difficult is going to be for us to reach that world, because as you know, as a technology now, it's very easy to reach out to all this country easily. What we need in the coming days is to increase our road shows around the world to make, to let people to understand what we have as opportunities, as well as we need to attract the people who, as the investors, of what benefit they can get from Bahrain government, since they are one of the investors that they can invest in this country. All of these rules and regulation, it have to work parallel with what the government is moving towards. And I think if that all comes together, I think we will do wonderful business with around the world together.
Thank you so much. Just one very last question, but make it short, please.
Very last
it's
and
the
quick
final
question.
one, yeah.
All right, thank you all for your great insights. I just really want to hear your thoughts about this. So we are talking about creating spaces for people and goods, perhaps, whether industrial, offices, or residential. Now, one important aspect is the transportation. So if we talk about the transportation industry and the transportation, new transportation technologies, whether it's Hyperloop or drones for delivery, like Mr. Faisal mentioned, or what is even more important than that, the driverless cars or autonomous vehicles that are changing the transportation industry. And in one research that we did, we looked into the link between autonomous vehicles and the ride-sharing model, which basically will lead to requiring less parking spaces and therefore potentially more units and more higher property value and probably even more affordable housing. So how do you see the link between new transportation technologies and the future of the real estate industry? Thank you.
Okay.
A really good question and a good observation as well. I think going forward, me personally, there's going to be a complete mix. When we talk about the drones, the driverless cars, the infrastructure, which will be there for the higher end locations, and that's the big word over here, location, location, location. It's still going to need to be supported by a different demographic who will not be perhaps using the Uber cars without a driver in it, a bit like those movies from the 1980s. What we do see is we see the potential for development over time, but there is still going to be a huge part of the property market which will be directed at the support function employees who represent a very large proportion of the population, expat and local Bahrainis in that particular area. So there's still going to be that independence which has come through from maybe transport years ago, where it was company vehicles that would transport people around, therefore reducing the carbon footprint, therefore having more of a green impact. As the population goes up and the populous demographic requires a certain level of transportation which is accessible to the place of work, there still is going to be some issues with green. Therefore, your hybrid cars and a change to electric vehicles, EV stations, etc., that all of the car companies are working on hugely at the moment, will have an impact as we move into 2030, 2040 and beyond towards that target green zero at whatever final date we actually get to. So there's going to be a combination. The Industrial Revolution over time showed the increase in usage, and then bringing it back down again has taken a long time. It's the same with transport. It's the same with infrastructure. As long as we start working towards it, I think we'll have an exceptionally good potential, but there's still going to be those constraints away from it. But an excellent question, thank you.
And I think really quickly, and I think you're right in terms of, I think there'll be a whole load of redevelopment of parking facilities. Now, whether that's municipalities investing in the public realm, I think that's going to be really important. So trying to, create more green spaces throughout our cities, across the region, I think that's important, as people begin to sort of vote with their own dollars as to the kind of world they want to live in and the kind of world we want our children to live in. I think that's important, So a reduction in cars and a reduction of sort of concrete car parking spaces, more greenery. I think that's important because that also will add value to surrounding real estate.
Okay, thank you so much. I know there are a number of questions, but I think our panelists will be available after the session for a while, and maybe you can catch them. Thank you so much, Mr. Faisal, and thank you, Stefan. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, Bassam, for joining us virtually. And I truly enjoyed the conversation, and I look forward to meeting you sometime in the future. Thank you.
Thank you all.